Emperor, we come for you! We come for you!
Did IQs just drop sharply while I was away?
Long live the fighters!
God, I missed that music.
I did. Gosh, a week felt like forever.
I know, right? But we're back.
We are here.
We're back. And apologies for not having an episode last week. We had some technical difficulties. Let's just leave it at that.
You can leave. No, that was my fault. I couldn't record. There wasn't a chance I was recording Sunday night. I was all messed up.
And then Monday was a fiasco
Monday was a mess. And Tuesday we were like, what do we do now? You know what? We're going to hold our breath and make it till next week at this point.
Yeah, so. Exactly. But you know, that little part in there where Ellen Ripley says, have IQs dropped sharply while I was away? I feel like that has indeed happened.
Oh man. Whew. 1 week off. And this is what happened to our culture. Yeah.
Everything went to shit. I really feel like that happened. Like just IQs did just drop sharply while we were away. So we're going to talk about that, particularly this cancel culture and how out of control it's getting, because it's just getting absolutely ridiculous. So we're going to talk about that on today's episode, and we're going to talk about that also in relationship to integrity as well, because I think that's going to be an interesting dichotomy. So the idea being, you know, things are getting canceled left and right. And somebody might say, well, why is that a bad thing? Why shouldn't the word blackboard or black hole, why shouldn't we ban, get rid of those terms? If people were to take offense by them, what harm is it that we just get rid of them? Where are we doing the harm? And so I want to talk about that, because I think there's severe harm to our culture and to our society by being absolutely, completely, and totally asinine. So we're going to talk about that and give other folks who happen to listen to this program, give them some fuel on how to rebut those kinds of takes.
Good. I think we need more of that.
I do too. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to spend the majority of the time. We do have a little bit of stupid news that we're going to get into. And I think it dovetails right into this topic, but well, welcome. I have no idea what season, episode, or number we are actually on anymore.
I believe we're at season 4, episode 8, if memory serves, because I think we've got this one and one more. Maybe.
No, I think this one is number 9 for season.
No, This is 9. Excuse me. This one and one more, and we're going to close out season 4 before we make some changes for season 5.
Yeah. So season 4, episode 9, number 47 of the Fusion Underground. Wow, that's pretty amazing.
It is pretty amazing.
That's pretty amazing. But here at the Fusion Underground, what we try to do is we try to make sense of the world by having principled discussions about such topics as entertainment, current events, politics, and culture. Our mission is to educate people to become critical thinkers so they can live more empowered and happier lives. As always, I'm your host, Manuel Ramirez, and I'm joined in the virtual studio, as always, by my brother, Jason Moret. How are you doing, sir?
Good to be back. Good to be right here.
Yeah, it's amazing how much fun we have doing this.
It's amazing how much of my week is defined by our last episode. I recognize that this last week. It was like just pressure. It was a big void missing from my normal work week and life, and just I can't do that again. Let's not do that again. We got to figure out how to not do that again.
Right. And we've got some changes, as we kind of alluded to. Right. We'll have some more information, I think, maybe next week to share.
Okay.
So we will cross through that. So how are
There
you
he
doing?
is.
How
I need a filler so I can find my stuff. You know what? I'm
yeah, yeah.
okay. I'm okay. I'm
All
actually
right.
looking forward to next weekend. I'm taking some much needed time off of work and taking a week off. My kids are out of school for 3 days, and I'm taking the other 4 days just for myself. And I'm kind of looking forward to that. It's been a long time since I've been out, and I recognize that I'm in a spot now where if I don't give myself a little bit of mental and emotional and personal reprieve, a respite, if you will, I'm gonna lose it.
Well,
It's
take
just
some
been,
time.
yeah, it's just
Yeah.
been go 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 for a long time. So yeah, I'm looking forward to having a little bit of time off for personal reflection.
Well, good. You need it. I know you've been working hard. So
Thanks.
last week, I do have there's a glimmer of hope that I have for the future. A
Ooh,
glimmer, a slight glimmer.
okay.
Um,
Shot
so
in the arm. Hit me.
yeah. So um, last year, this is actually my second year of doing this, but I was approached by a university last year to be a part of a panel to assess scholarship applications for a scholarship that they have. And I said, yeah, I'd love to do that. And so last year I got to assess applications and judge them based on this rubric that they put together. And then based on those applications, it gets whittled down to a select few, and then they hold interviews. Well, this year I was asked again if I would um, review some of the applications, and I said, of course. And then they asked if I would sit on one of the interview panels, and I said I would love to. So last week I actually got to do that.
Oh wow.
And got to interview some pretty amazing kids, 18-year-olds, seniors in high school who are about to go into this university. And some of the things that these kids are doing is pretty damn phenomenal. I have to admit, it's pretty awesome what these kids are doing, what they've already accomplished in high school going up until this point. Um, and it gives me some hope. It gives me some hope that there are some kids out there, 18-year-olds who are intelligent, who are very articulate, very well read, well spoken, know what they want in life. But also this particular scholarship, there's a big emphasis on leadership and community service as well. So every one of the applicants had to demonstrate how they've been leaders and how they've given back to their communities up until this point. And so it was really nice getting to meet some of these kids after assessing their applications, asking them questions. And it gave me, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun being able to do that. And yeah, I don't have a 100% negative view of high schoolers right now.
Well,
Maybe,
that's good.
Maybe 1% is worthwhile.
Right.
I don't know. I don't know, but
How many of these scholarships are awarded?
actually, I'm not sure how many it differs from year to year. So it all
Okay.
really depends on how much the trust has grown and how much money is available, as well as, other types of factors. But my understanding is I think they've, at the end of the day, they award somewhere between 10 and 20. I don't know the exact number.
Okay.
But somewhere between that.
See, you look at that as I mean, and don't get me wrong, it's inspiring if it's, talking to kids who are actually leaders and intelligent human beings already and trying to actually further them. And that's awesome. For me, if I was sitting there, I'm like, I couldn't do it. I'm like, I want them all to have it. Every single one of you, if you're applying for this, that's huge. You all need a college education, and I'd probably bankrupt the trust if that were the case. Cause I could, God forbid it was just like one,
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Well, and the good thing is I didn't have to pick. I mean, in a way I did, because I had to assess, assess their their interview responses according to a rubric and basically score
you had
them,
to
I guess.
score them,
They
right?
score them for lack of a term, but there are other members on the panel, so it's not all 100% up to me. And from what I understand, there's, they combine all the scores, and I'm sure they probably do like an average, and then whoever, the top 10 or the top 20 are the ones that actually get awarded the scholarship at the end of the day. So I don't know how I have no idea how the other members on the panel, how they scored. We don't talk about that. But it was a lot of fun. So I hope to be able to do it next year again too. So that's good.
Well, cool. I think you need that. I think you need to do that as much as humanly possible. I know your slightly dimmed view of our high school graduates right now and in the past. See, there it is. You're rolling your eyes again. So I think this is much needed for you and for all of our listening audience, that yes, there is still hope out there. There just might be only in about 1% of our graduating class.
Yeah. Well, there was a story just a few days ago. I can't remember where it was from. I want to say it was like in Virginia, somewhere on the East Coast. I don't have the article in front of me, but this is why everybody who's listened to the show has heard me rant and rave and vent about public education and public education teachers, and how I think the entire public education system is 100% absolute piss and shit. And I do believe that. There's so many pieces of evidence that just point to it being a total crap bag. Okay. And there was a story that came out it just adds another brick into the building of shit that is the public education system. Just a couple of days ago, it was found, the school board found this by miracle chance. Some kid, he's 18 or 19 years old. He's a senior in high school, and he has, what was it? I'm not joking. It was like 0.13 GPA. 0.13 GPA. It might have been a 1.5. So it's either 0.15 or 0.13. He doesn't even have a 1.0. It's less than a 1.0. And this poor young man was actually in the top half of his class.
What?
He's still ranked 60. No, it wasn't in the top half. I think he ranked 62 out of something like a little over 100 kids. So he was near the top half. And which means there are kids that are still worse than he is.
A lot worse.
Right. And he's failed his math classes, he's failed his English classes, always. And even though he was failing classes, the school just passed him on to the next grade.
Wait, this okay. Wait. Let me.
He's a functional illiterate.
You said 0.13, 0.1, but that's that's an F average.
Oh, it's worse than an F. It's like a Z average.
1.0, if I remember correctly, is a like, D average, right?
Actually, I think maybe. No, I think 2. I think 2 is a D average. 2.0 is a D average.
No, 4s are A's, 3s are B's, 2s are C's, 1s are D's.
Okay, so 1 are D's. Okay, so it definitely. Well, he's in the failing category. There's no doubt about that. But the fact that the fact that he was going to graduate, he was actually going to graduate before this was found out, and then they claim that this was an anomaly. No, it's not an anomaly, because
how is it an anomaly if he's in the top 6 or he's in the 60th percentile in his graduating class?
Right, which means there are people behind. He's still performing better than some of the other kids. Because if I don't care if
he's in the 40th percentile of his class, that means that 40% of your graduating class are failing. They can't even make a D.
Right.
in
Right.
English, math, science.
Right. And so now the school district is looking into the situation.
What they're looking into is, how did this get out? That's what they're looking
Well, of
into.
course.
They're not stupid. They know that this is going
Right.
on, just like every school district knows this goes on.
But they've supposedly been looking into it for 2 years. Allegedly.
But I thought this was an anomaly and they just found it out.
Right. This is
Wait.
this is just absolutely egregious. The public education system is absolutely atrocious. And here's the thing: this with the scholarships that on the kids that I talked to in the scholarships, I interviewed 6 kids, and out of the 6 kids, one of them attends a public school. The other 4 of the kids attend charter schools, and the 6th kid attends a private school. By private,
what does that tell you?
It's a Catholic school. It's a religious school. So 5 out of the 6 kids that I interviewed do not go to public schools. Are not in the public school system.
So it is possible for your child to actually do well in a public school, but that is going to require you as a parent out there, if you're hearing me, and the child as to be dedicated to the education that they are going to get and to pursuing their own endeavors to try and make the best of it. Otherwise, I mean, just on what you're telling me right now, the deck is absolutely stacked against them from the day they register.
Well, and it's no better than when they get into university, right? Because here's an article, and I hate to say this.
No, you don't.
No, I do. I hate to say this because this is an article about my alma mater, Arizona State University. Go Devils.
Oh, hold on a minute. Let me take notes.
This is pretty egregious. This is terrible. This is absolutely terrible. It doesn't bring me any pride that as a Sun Devil. It really doesn't. The title of this news article is Arizona State Dean, grading writing based on quality is racist, promotes white language supremacy. Yes. So let me read part of this article here for you. It says an Arizona State University associate dean penned a 358-page book detailing how grading students' writing is a form of racism and white supremacy. So if you look at sentence structure, paragraph structure, page structure, etc., and you're writing, using English, that's racist, and it's a form of white supremacy. In a book titled Labor-Based Grading Contracts, Building Equity and Inclusion in the Compassionate Writing Classroom, Professor, I'm going to butcher this name and my apologies, Professor Aseo Inoue, I don't know, encourages teachers to ditch grading for a labor-based grading system wherein students earn grades based on their effort. The quality of a student's writing would not help or hinder their course grade. Let me repeat that. The quality of a student's writing would not help or hinder their course grade. Just how much effort they put into it.
Yeah.
So if they sat at a blank page for 8 hours, they put in a lot of effort, and they should get a good grade.
Yep. I'll remind this professor next time he goes to, I don't know, buy a car, that it's not the quality of the work that's done on building that car that's important, or the safety features of thing, but how hard everybody worked to really try and put it together.
Right.
Yeah, because that's what's going to matter.
Right. The article goes on and says critical race theory contributed to Inoue's idea that ranking things is a system rooted in racism.
Oh, really?
Because
Shocker.
Because grading is a form of ranking, grading must also be a racist idea. In his book, Inoue dubbed grading and the education system writ large racist for their connections to ranking. Quote, ranking is a part of a much longer racist and white supremacist tradition in Western intellectual history, Inoue writes. Quote, ranking has been deeply embedded in racist thinking, discourses, and logics, mainly because it has been deployed as a way to justify a number of racist, empirical, and colonial projects over the last 400 years. So just because people did some things with the English language, therefore language as a whole, English language as a whole, is racist and white supremacist. I, I,
That this is beyond comprehend. Okay. There were a lot of people warning years and years ago that participation trophies were going to lead to bad things.
Yeah.
This is another example of that. College degrees are going to be participation trophies. High school diplomas almost already are. So at what point do we want more out of what we value in our country? Whether it's the education that we receive, the products that we buy, the life that we have for ourselves and our family. At what point do we say that, you know what, I want something more than just somebody else's level of satisfaction? There's got to be a way to grade that, and that's exactly what we call it. It's called grading. I mean, you crying out loud, when you go on to, everybody's buying everything online, when you go look at something online, what do you look at? You look at reviews and a star rating. That's a grading system. You mean to tell me that that's now racist because it's applying a grade?
Yes.
Come on. No. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Everybody out there, I don't care. Even Dr. Inoue, or I know whatever he knows that that's not true. All of this is the fact of the matter is, when you go to school, you have to be graded based on your understanding of the subject. That's what the grade is. Do you understand it or not? And how well? That's what the grade is about. And I'm sorry, that does require effort to work at. And just because you're going to, quote unquote, stare at a blank page, as you said, for 8 hours and do nothing, well, you might as well have just done nothing. But don't expect me to grade you and feel sorry for you and say, okay, that's good enough.
Well,
That's
can you,
not how our society works, or should. And that's not how it has worked up to this point. And we as a country, and we as people in that contribute to our society right now, have to start being willing to take a stand for what is right.
well, and here's the thing, right? Tell this to Hollywood. Hollywood, didn't they just do the Golden Globes or something like that? And aren't they about ready to do the Academy Awards now or something?
Don't know, don't care.
But what do? They give awards. They give awards based on certain criteria that they deem some movies or some actors and actresses to be better than others.
Right.
So by this guy's logic, all of Hollywood is a bunch of racists.
Is racist. Yep.
Well, we already know that, but let's,
right.
let's just go ahead and confirm that based on this guy's theoretical framework here.
Sure.
So anywhere there's any kind of this is lunacy, because basically what he is saying here is anytime there's a hierarchy where somebody for whatever characteristic that they may have is placed higher on a hierarchical chain than somebody else, that hierarchy represents racist white supremacy.
Correct.
And that is absolutely redonkulous. Mm-hmm. We see hierarchies throughout nature, not just in the animal kingdom.
Correct.
It exists everywhere.
Absolutely. It's part of natural law. And I'm not talking about law written down. It's just the way life works. The survival of the fittest idea. It's the weakest that fall behind and fall to the bottom. That's true no matter where you change the frickin' bar.
Right.
And that's all this is. It's trying to arbitrarily change the middle ground to try and cover up for insufficiencies in certain areas. And I'm sorry, that's just excusing away, and it's not going to end. That never ends, because no matter how you change the bar, you're going to have to continually try and adjust that to arbitrarily adjust for it. It's not going to end. Right. And again, this will not end until we say that that's it. This is done.
Yeah. So this feeds into the topic that I wanted to get into today, which is, how cancel culture is going off. Well, it's been long gone off the rails, but now it's just cranking it all up to 11 now. This past week, it was announced that 6 Dr. Seuss books will no longer be published over offensive images. So now people want to say that Dr. Seuss was racist, or at least he had an unconscious racial bias that found its way into some of his illustrations in 6 books. So the publisher has since delisted these books. They're stopping publication and distribution of these novels, of these books. What a lot of people fail to recognize is that this gained momentum on social media before the publisher opted to stop publication. So this was born out of social justice warriors on social media who found these things and started to raise awareness about it. And the publisher, in an attempt to call favor with the social justice warriors who are not buying Dr. Seuss books.
No,
they're not buying Dr. Seuss books. So in an attempt to appease the mob, the publisher decided that they will no longer publish the books. And this also falls on the heels, something that happened about a week ago, where Amazon made an announcement to absolutely nobody, but everyone in particular. They made an announcement saying that they were going to delist particular books that they found Amazon finds to be offensive. Okay. And shortly after that announcement was made, there were many different conservative writers who have written conservative political books or conservative books on economics or any other host of very benign topics, that some of these authors were recognizing that they were losing reviews of their books. And so based on the review counts going down and positive reviews disappearing from their books, it makes it harder for those books to be presented during certain types of searches. And so these conservative authors are now recognizing that their books are not showing up with various searches on Amazon as a way of censoring these books and hiding these books from people actually purchasing them. eBay, after Dr. Seuss's publisher decided they were no longer going to publish 6 books, eBay decided that they were going to delist all of the sales off of their website for people who are trying to sell these books. I would like it known that Mein Kampf is still available on Amazon and eBay. And
yes.
not that I'm saying that that Mein Kampf should not be available. It should absolutely be available. People should have access and should be able to read that book. But if this is why you and I say it's so important for people to have principles, because this is if you're going to say that Dr. Seuss is bad, but you're not going to say that Adolf Hitler's Mein Kampf is bad, then there's something wrong with your principles here.
Correct.
Something completely wrong.
Well, and I find it interesting how, so if something's offensive, let's just say that if I ran a zoo by Dr. Seuss is somehow deemed offensive or potentially offensive. Okay. Where does personal responsibility fall off the wagon? This is what I say, when I look at and I'm going to pick on the left for a minute, but I'm going to say all of the liberal, because most of the social justice warriors and all of the activist groups, they tend to be on the left-hand side of the aisle. So if you're going to say something is offensive and you're looking out for the proverbial our and everyone's best interest, when do those people actually lose their rights and their ability to think for themselves? You want them to think for themselves so long as they agree with you, and you want their voice to be heard when they are crying out on the street what you've told them you want to cry out. You want to be able to mobilize those people. But when it comes to actually trusting the individual to make their own decision, they can't be trusted with that. Because let's just say, for the sake of argument, that if I ran a zoo, a Dr. Seuss book about a child who runs a zoo, for crying out loud, is suddenly offensive. If it's that offensive, then people won't buy it, and people won't read it, and people won't read it to their kids because it's offensive. But if that's the case, let that happen and let people not buy it and let sales for it go down to the toilet. Guess what? Supply and demand will remove that just because there's no demand for it because people don't want it. But that's not what's happening. You're arbitrarily saying we know better than you and better than everyone else. We've deemed this offensive and we are erasing it. That is censorship way above and beyond the reach of any group or organization to choose for me and for everyone else out there what is okay to read. That's wrong.
And anybody in history, just go back through history, anytime any group has burned books, has censored books, has delisted books, they have never been the good guys.
Ever.
Never once have they ever been the good guys. And we're seeing that now. And keep in mind, the left, they're the ones who claim to be against censorship. But they talk about that all the time.
Right.
But what they're really in favor of, they're really in favor of censorship for those items that they deem to be problematic. They don't want to be censored, but they want to be able to censor others.
And you have to look at the source for this. You know, I was listening to this too. So we'll take Disney. Everybody, whether you love, hate, actually respects Disney for being able to produce what they have produced, at least early on. I'm not talking about the last 10 to 12 years because, well, I don't want to get into that. But I mean, you go like Robin Hood and Aristocats and, you know, I mean, they're good kids movies and they're good family movies. There's usually some sort of lesson that actually brings a family together you can talk about. They're great stories and great adaptations. Disney now has surrendered any and all kind of common sense to a group, a whole panel, a group of panels actually, who are made up of nothing but these woke activist groups, BLM, Antifa. There's like 3 or 4 others that I was just reading about that are all actually monthly meeting with Disney so that they can go back and look at all of their previous titles and tell them what is offensive and what is not. Well, guess what? If their whole job is to show up and tell Disney what they have to cancel next, do you think that's going to stop? They're just going to go, oh, no, you don't need us anymore. No, they're going to keep going and keep finding something. Yeah. And that just keeps, again, this is what I'm talking about, raising this bar of what's acceptable and what is not. Yeah. There's nothing left. Absolutely nothing left. This is not going to end until the American people say no more.
And we're already seeing it. The Disney placed trigger warnings on the Muppet Show off of Disney Plus. So now when you want to watch the Muppets, you're going to have to sit through a trigger warning in case you were offended by anything. And
but do you really think, and I'm asking you directly, do you really think that trigger warnings are going to last much longer? Let me rephrase that question. Do you think the Muppet Show will survive much longer with just a trigger warning?
No.
Because I say bullshit. No. I say that gets pulled off of there probably within the next 90 days.
Maybe within 90 days. Sure. There's a possibility there.
This doesn't stop.
I think they'll eventually get pulled, or it'll slowly just disappear off of the streaming service and go away. And if you don't think if you think there's got to be a limit. They've already, the same social justice warriors, they've already turned their sights. Now Pepe Le Pew is under the gun. Pepe Le Pew and Speedy Gonzalez, because Speedy Gonzalez uses Mexican stereotypes because all the little mice are Mexicans, and Pepe Le Pew promotes rape culture. Those are the arguments, right? And let's talk about Pepe Le Pew for a second, right?
I thought you were going to say something about him being French, and I'm like, since when do the French get offended by anything? But okay, all right.
The argument is Pepe Le Pew promotes rape culture because he goes after the cat, he gets the cat, and he starts kissing the cat, and she's fighting away, clearly saying no. And she gets away, and then he does his little bouncy stuff as he chases after her. Okay. But what's not being talked about is how do you square this with those episodes with Pepe Le Pew where Pepe becomes destunkified, right? He's like, he no longer stinks, right? And he's all perfumed up and he's all handsome now. And then the cat sees him, and the cat now wants him.
No.
Has become enraged with lust, and then attacks Pepe Le Pew and starts kissing on him. And now Pepe doesn't want to have anything to do with it, and he bolts. We're not talking about that. We're not talking about the flip side of that. Now, as a kid, I watched tons of Looney Tunes cartoons.
Of course, we all did.
And
we all did.
I never watched Pepe Le Pew and thought I need to rush out and grab a girl and start kissing her.
Well, you never watched the Coyote and Roadrunner and started to like try and call up the Acme company or figure out where you could get a giant, I don't know, trampoline or a 10,000 ton weight so that you can set a trap and drop it on somebody out in front of your house either. But watch, that's going to be promoting violence, and next thing you know, that's going to go away. I mean, this is so freaking stupid. How far do we go with this?
I mean, keeping in mind that the only reason why Pepe Le Pew was after the cat was because Pepe Le Pew thought she was a skunk.
Right.
Because in every episode, it has some, some paint gets rubbed on the back
paint,
of the cat.
The flagpole or was one.
Something like that, right? Yeah. And so then Pepe thinks that it's a skunk. And it was very clear that the cat didn't want to have anything to do with Pepe Le Pew because, well, she's a cat. She's not a skunk.
Right.
And then they ended up introducing the female skunk who catches wind, who catches sight of Pepe Le Pew, and then she wants him. And so she goes after him.
Yep. And he's chasing after the cat and
then
the other
female
skunk. I can't remember her name.
I can't remember her name either.
Yeah.
But these are all of these kinds of that nobody's talking about all of this in context. So what got me thinking about some of this is I saw this post on Facebook, and somebody that I know on Facebook posted this, and it's this picture. It's an attempt at being a meme, and it's an attempt at being clever. And this individual posted this picture. And the picture just says this. I'm going to read it to you. It says, "No one is canceling Dr. Seuss." Now, point of clarification for any of the people who are familiar, I don't know if this is true, but apparently Dr. Seuss was not pronounced, the name Seuss is not pronounced Seuss. I was told this. I don't know this definitively, but I was told this by a friend that Seuss was actually pronounced as Soyce. I don't know if that's true or not. Anyway, I call it Dr. Seuss because everybody calls him Dr. Seuss, and
whatever.
Shut up and just accept the Seuss. Okay. So the meme here says, "No one is canceling Dr. Seuss. There are 6 books that his own estate, capitalized, are ceasing to publish because of overtly racist content. They are using them as a way to say, quote, 'This is the heritage that we came from, and we have learned and are doing better now,' end quote. 6 books out of hundreds isn't canceling, it's learning. It's like when you rocked whatever horrible fashion was trendy when you were 13, and at 30, you're like, phew, glad I got over that tragic look. Dr. Seuss and most of his work is alive and well, not canceled. 6 books are no longer being published. It's the right thing to do." No, it's not, and I want to talk about this.
No, it's not. It's wrong. It's censorship from a third party, and I'm sorry, that is just absolutely disgusting. Now, there's a lot to unpack in that little statement, so you can relay all this back to your friend. Disney, like I brought up before, they're canceling a lot of their crap too, and that does not make it right either. Self-canceling is no better or worse. So don't get on a freaking high horse about that crap either. And second, yes, 6 books being canceled are canceled. Now, if this was actually quote unquote learning, we're learning and we're doing better, and this was the heritage let's just say for sake of argument, I were to accept that. I'm going to accept that hook, line, and sinker, 100%. Why not print that out in big, bold Dr. Seussy letters and put it in the front of that book? Why not put your trigger warning, like you called it before, in the front of that book and say, you know what? We are going to continue to make this book because it's more than just what someone might infer from it. But we recognize that this is part of the heritage we are from. And while this could be construed this way, we want to put this warning in here and say, you, the reader, you make up your own mind. You're an intelligent human being with the right to discern accurately your own choice, and put that out there. If that were true, that would suffice, but it's not. Censorship is wrong.
So, and I agree with you. I want to kind of break this part down a little bit. So when the beginning of this meme says no one is canceling Dr. Seuss, and makes the claim that his own estate, all shouty capitalized letters, his own estate is ceasing to publish. Okay, yes, his own estate is seeking to or ceasing to publish these books. But they made that decision because the social justice warriors on the left literally dug through books and they found them and then said, this is racist. And so what happened is the estate has now bent the knee to the social justice mob as an attempt to say, please don't do anything bad to us.
Mm-hmm.
Please don't pull, because the entire country witnessed what happened last year across the United States. BLM, Antifa, they went into downtown places, town squares and whatnot, and they tore statues down that they determined were problematic and of the emblematic of racism in this country. And so they tore those things down, and they were rioting because of racism and trying to fix it. Now you have companies like the Dr. Seuss Enterprises or whatever the hell it's called. They're afraid of the woke mob, and they don't want to have their reputation trashed and tarnished, and they don't want to have boycotts and all this kind of stuff going against them. So they bent the knee at the drop of a hat and said, fine, we're going to stop publishing these books. So no, they actually were canceled, and they bent the knee to the cancel mob. So there's that part of it.
Right. Well, in the same way, I'm sorry, the Dr. Seuss Enterprises, that's Disney today. I'm just making a correlation for everyone out there. Disney Studios and Walt Disney Productions, who actually made most of the stuff that's looking at being canceled now, are two different things. To say that Walt Disney would be self-censoring is absolutely asinine. That is not the same. Nor is Dr. Seuss Enterprises the same as saying Dr. Seuss himself is self-censoring. Continue.
Right. And this is not like the horrible fashion trend when you were 13 and now you're looking back on it and at 30 and thinking, whoo, glad I got over that tragic look. It is absolutely nothing like that. First of all, whatever horrible fashion thing that you were involved in, you were not the culture in and of itself. You were participating in part of the culture, but the culture evolved because fashion evolves, not because the trend was seen to be problematic.
Right.
So that you can't make this type of a comparison. Yes, we're all glad we don't look like we did during the 80s, but guess what? Those styles and those fashions are also cyclical. They come back.
Right. I was going to say they do come back.
Yeah.
Unless you're trying to make a comparison saying that racism is trendy, right, and thank God that trend is out. But don't worry, everybody out there, hang on to your freaking KKK outfits and your lynches, because racism is going to come back in another 10 years. Are you serious?
Right. Now, the last line of this little meme thing here, it's the right thing to do. And this is really the big bone that I have to pick with this meme, whatever the hell you want to call this. It's not the right thing to do.
No.
And so how do we respond when somebody says, well, it's the right thing to do? Because let's face it, on the surface, it seems really good. It seems good. Well, why wouldn't we want to get rid of racist material? Why
Well,
is that such a bad thing?
I'd ask that, or answer that question with another question. Do you believe in the right of free speech?
Yes.
Then there you go. Censorship is the antithesis of free speech. How about this? Let me change that around. Do you believe in the exercise of individual thought? Do you
Yes.
think that you have the right to think for yourself?
Yes.
Then censorship is the antithesis of that as well. Because by telling me what I'm able to consume, whether it's via books or via media or movies or what I can look up on the internet, because it happens on the internet too. We talked about censorship, and anything you want to quote unquote Google. Well, if somebody's controlling what you get to see, that is censoring information. So if you believe that your own thoughts are your own and you have a right to think whatever you like, and that's your proprietary idea, your proprietary information, that my brain is my own, nobody can control that, then censorship is 100% wrong, because it does shape that.
Well, and these are very similar conversations that happened a few decades ago with respect to good old Samuel Clemens, Mark Twain.
Yep.
There have been many schools, several different schools or school boards, etc., that have banned Huckleberry Finn, right? Because of, the Adventures of Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn, etc. They banned those books because of the use of the N-word in those books. And that's why they banned them. And people like me have been saying for years that there's a difference between using those words and creating a sense of verisimilitude within the story itself, because that was the language that was used at the time, not when Samuel Clemens was around per se, but at the setting in which Mark Twain was writing. That's the language that was used.
Right.
And so we have to consider context. Just like you have to consider the context of Dr. Seuss.
Sure.
Dr. Seuss's books they're caricatures of everybody.
Right.
In The Grinch Stole Christmas, there's a whole town called Whoville, for
Right.
crying out loud, and the Grinch himself is a caricature of
Actually, I think Whoville is in like 3 different Dr. Seuss
like 3
books.
different Dr. Seuss books.
That's the whole point. It's that they're universal. They don't apply to any one culture or person. It's for everyone. That's why everybody looks kind of like a weird amalgamation of a whole bunch of different people, because it's not supposed to look like any one race or type of person.
But I guess in one of these books that is being depublished, or no longer published, there was reference to the word Chinaman.
Yeah, I think that was on I saw it on Mulberry Street. I
saw it on Mulberry Street. Yeah. And then there's like a Chinese man who's like eating with chopsticks, but of course he's a caricature looking, and of course the outrage mob says, well, this is insensitive, it's racist. But you have to understand the context. So that's the first thing that in my argument against all of this, is that we have to understand the context. But the other thing too that I want people to take away from this is you have to draw the line. Mm-hmm. You have to say no.
Right.
Because here's the problem. If we don't start saying no, every little victory empowers them to find something else.
Correct.
And it empowers them to find something else and something else. And so it becomes death of a thousand cuts.
Right. And it doesn't stop. I talked about this exact same thing when we were talking about this up behind me. I have my Redskins banners up behind me in my garage. I said, if you think for 1 minute everybody's just going to be appeased by the fact that the Redskins had to change their name, you're out of your mind.
Yeah.
This doesn't stop. This
Right.
ramps up. I mean, this was just the, and this is still just the beginning. This doesn't stop. I warned about this time and time again. You've heard me. If you think for 1 minute you can give a little bit, there is absolutely no satisfaction for groups like this. Every victory is just okay, what's next? And then we go looking for the next thing to attack, just like you're talking about with Pepe Le Pew.
Yeah.
And Speedy Gonzalez. I mean, it does not stop. And if you think that saying enough is going to be enough, you have to stand up and say that.
Right. Because every single one of these little battles and these social battles, if you back down, what we're allowing to happen is we're allowing tyranny to gain an additional foothold on it, because that's what it is. You're talking about a small group of people who are enforcing their will upon a large majority of people that say, no, there's nothing wrong with these books. You have a small group of people who have put enough pressure to get a publisher to unpublish these books, to stop publication on these books. So they have, this small group of social justice warriors have been able to control the publishing acts of a company.
And I'm glad you brought that part up, because there's been this is infuriating. So I'm going to try and control myself so I can speak a little bit more clearly. There has been so much gaslighting on social media, in the mainstream media, and everywhere you look, so much gaslighting to that I believe the vast majority of Americans in this country really do believe that these groups are massive, that they're the majority. They're not. You're talking about in entirety, and I'm talking about all of them put together, are way less than 10%, way less, closer to 6. I mean, there are so few of them. They're minuscule.
If that.
But the problem
6%.
is the masses of us really do believe, because we hear it on social media, we hear it on the mainstream media, on TV and radio, that the mass of people think that these things are offensive. So, and we're afraid of this invisible mob out there who's going to attack us. They don't exist. They're not that big. We are huge in comparison. The amount of people out there who think that If I Ran a Zoo by Dr. Seuss is absolutely fine, leave it alone, is overwhelming in comparison to the very small handful. Yet we're afraid to stand up against that. And I do blame especially the mainstream media, and I'll pick on CNN and MSNBC and the likes, for absolutely convincing everybody through their gaslighting that, and I keep using that phrase, gaslighting, that's for those of you out there that don't know, that's a reference to an old Broadway production where a man is actually tries to convince his wife that she's going crazy, and he keeps reducing the gas in the lights in the house so that she can't see, and she starts doubting herself, and it eventually drives her nuts. But he's able to convince her it's her, not him manipulating her. That's what's happening with the media and everyone else. They are convincing you, me, and everyone else out there that these BLM, Antifa, all these social justice jackwagons really do outnumber us by like 10-1. When in reality, we outnumber them by like 100-1. And if we actually take the stand, we grow a little bit of fortitude and stand with a sense of integrity and stand up and say, no, absolutely not. You're not going to destroy our culture, because that's what this is. It's a destruction of our existing culture so they can remake what they want. but it's going to take us recognizing that we have the power to stand up and say no more.
What the thing I want people to keep in mind is when you get a group of people together, uh, and it usually starts off pretty small and pretty simple, something, whatever it is, whatever little organization it is, or whatever little group, it starts off simple. And over time, that naturally gets bigger and bigger, and you add more people to it. You start, now you might have had a group of, let's say, 5 people, and then eventually a 6th person gets added, and then a 7th person gets added over time, and an 8th person. And as you add more people, you need more rules to deal with the convolutedness of all of the different information pathways that exist within that group. Because it's very easy for 2 people, you and I, to communicate with one another. There's only one channel, the channel that exists between you and I. But as you start adding more and more people, that number of information and communication channels increases by leaps and bounds. And so it's a natural progression that anytime you have a group together, you're starting to put a group in place. And as that group begins to grow, it gets more and more complicated, which means you have more and more rules that try to govern behavior. Because it's very easy for a really small group of people to govern our behavior if we all believe in the same values. But if you start adding people and you don't know if they necessarily have all of the same 100% values, then you start creating more rules and regulations to govern that behavior, which means the more rules you're creating, the greater the propensity that now you're tilting more towards confined order as opposed to this loose freedom of interacting people. You start imposing more and more order on that social organization. And we have this in society. Society is naturally going to get slowly more corrupt and more tyrannical over time. It's the natural progression of any kind of a society. And so this is one of those ways in which society gets more oppressive and more tyrannical, is when people start having battles like this and they say, well, this is offensive, we got to ban it, and this word is bad, so we got to ban it. And if you're not willing to stand up and say, you know what, enough's enough, stop, all you're doing is you're just giving ground. Every single time you're giving ground and giving ground, and those on the other side, they're victorious, and they can say, well, I'm going to take another step, and I'm going to take another step. As long as you keep retreating, they're going to continue to take another step. So we have to get to a point, and I think we've passed the point, where people just have to say, stop, enough's enough, I'm not going to give any ground up anymore.
Right. And I understand people, their propensity to say, well, 6 Dr. Seuss books, that's not a hill I'm going to go die on. And I understand that to a point. I do. And I empathize with that. And I think most Americans are in that spot. Well, there goes that. One more thing, moving on. What can I do about it? Forget it. It's not that big a deal. I've got a lot of other more important things to do. Yeah, I can understand that. But when it finally does knock on your door, when it's something that really does matter to you to a point where you can't ignore it, the likelihood is it's too late. It's already grown, like you're talking about, and gained the momentum to where it literally is the steamroller that will roll you over. And this is where you have to have the integrity to stand up for it, even when it's painful. And I mentioned this, so integrity is, a person said to have integrity when they actually display a principled dedication to their values and beliefs. Or you always hear the phrase, integrity means doing what's right even when no one's looking, right? Everybody's heard that. I was thinking about that the other day, and I said, what's, I think, more important is doing what's right and standing for right, especially when everyone is watching and when doing so could actually cause you harm. So what I mean by that, you and I had a discussion early before, I think or during the election, right around that time, we talked about the old blue dog Democrats, right? And we made that argument that they know, or they can see the deterioration of that party around them, but they can't stand up and say this isn't right. And I made the argument then that having a true belief in those values and principles, if you have integrity, you have to stand up and say, no, my values and principles have not changed. And I don't care who's attacking that, whether it's the people that I usually stand against, or unfortunately the people that I'm normally aligned with. But this is wrong. And it takes integrity to stand up knowing that you are going to come under fire for voicing that. But without being willing to do that, your values and principles fall to nothing. And I believe that most people out there have a belief in what they have in their core as far as what those values and principles are. You have to have the integrity to stand up for it, especially when you know that doing that will cause you pain.
I don't think most people would do that, though.
Most people aren't doing that. That's why Dr. Seuss books are being banned.
Most
That's
people
why
won't do it.
people haven't outright boycotted Disneyland and Disney for the crap that they did with what's her name, with the Mandalorian and some of the things that they're doing now. That's why we've allowed BLM and Antifa and all these social justice groups to run out and completely destroy the towns we live in and tear down the history that we raised our kids on and that we were raised with. That's why we've allowed this to go on as long as we have, because they're afraid of actually standing up on it. But at what point do we look around and we can no longer say, look what they're doing? When we have to look in the mirror and recognize it's not them, it's us. When we allow this to continue and we allow this to permeate, it's no longer their fault. It's our fault. If you've got an out of control 4-year-old or 5-year-old running around tearing up a department store or a grocery store or whatever, there's only so much that I can blame the child for. Every parent knows that look they get when they are allowing their child to run around like an absolute out of control animal. It's not the kid's fault anymore. It's the parent. We are the ones to blame for this at this point.
But
they're not going to stop.
I can't
stop it.
But I can't blame people for not speaking up. I mean, there's a part of me that can't blame them to a certain degree. There are some, because I don't believe 100% of the population has the wherewithal to stand up and say something. There are a lot of people that are deathly afraid.
Yes, they are.
And because you have people on social media, for example, who are being fired from their jobs for things that they said years ago, decades ago, that weren't even bad. I mean, we talked about it a couple of weeks ago where there was an instructor, wasn't it an instructor, who was fired, a journalist who was, there was a journalist who was fired for trying to talk about the racial slurs in the context of them being racial slurs. He didn't call somebody the racial slur. He was trying to educate around the racial slur and about why it's a racial slur or something along those lines. He was using the term, trying to understand the context that something was said, which means his use of the term was purely 100% academic. And that was considered problematic. And he was fired for it. So for the people that say, well, I don't want, I believe there are a lot of people in the country right now in our society who are fed up with it, but they don't want to lose their jobs. They have mortgages. They have families they're trying to take care of. They have food to put on the table.
Yep. And
some of these people, some of them, if they get fired from their job, they're not going to get another one anytime soon, or they're certainly not going to get one at the same pay rate that they're accustomed to. And in some of those situations, it can literally mean they cannot work in that industry. So,
I understand the difficulty. I absolutely do. And I empathize with everyone out there who yes, I get where you're at. I really do. But for me, and you know what? I could be one who could actually lose my job at some point. Sure, I could.
you and I
But
both.
and you and I had this discussion when we started doing this show early on. This
Yeah.
was a risk that we both knew we were taking.
Yeah.
But I feel that this is absolutely vital to preserving not only my own personal values and principles, but the ones that I were raised with and the ones that I'm going to pass on to my children, and a way of life.
Now, let me ask you this question.
Go.
We've talked about masonry on here, and I'm going to bring masonry in here for just a quick
Sure.
second.
Okay.
I think everybody who's listening to this show knows that we're Masons. As Masons, we often come, and it's rules within our fraternity. You will not stand against the overthrow of the United States of America.
Mm-hmm. No, it's I will not support any group with the intent of overthrowing the government.
Overthrowing the government, right?
Correct.
How do you define that?
So the overthrow of the government would, in essence, the way I would interpret that would
Not
be
interpret it. How do you define? How do we as a fraternity define it? It's extremely important because our Masonic brothers stood against the crown of England. They literally overthrew their government to install the United States of America. And for us to now in 2021 state that as Masons, we cannot do that, that's problematic.
Mm-hmm.
That literally George Washington is the only master Mason to be worshipful master of his lodge while being president of the United States. And he was the general of the Revolutionary Army. Benjamin Franklin, for those who don't know about Masonry, Benjamin Franklin was a Mason. Paul Revere, the guy who ran through Boston saying the British are coming, the British are coming, is a Mason. Many of the signers of the Declaration of Independence were Masons. How can we as a fraternity say we're not going to at what point, even in our Declaration of Independence, it states that at some point when mankind, when a people are so oppressed by their government that it becomes their duty to rise up and overthrow that government. That's what the Declaration of Independence says. Mm-hmm. Written and approved by Freemasons. How can we as Freemasons say, you know what? And I just got finished explaining how every society tilts continuously towards tyrannical oppression. One small step at a time. Just look at the Federal Register if you don't believe me. The Federal Register at the founding of this country was the Constitution. Mm-hmm. And now the Federal Register, if you print it out, mass millions and millions of pages long. And every single one of those pages basically is in support of regulations, laws and regulations that constrict the freedom, because laws don't do one thing and one thing only. They restrict freedom.
Restrict freedom. Yep.
So by that definition alone, that's enough. That's evidence to support my claim that over time, a society, an organization, a group of people gets more and more oppressive, that it tilts towards tyranny versus tilting towards freedom. So at what point, as Masons, does it become our duty to say enough?
Well, and oddly enough, I've been sitting here talking about the integrity and standing up for our values and principles, right? I've been on a little bit of a high horse on that. Integrity is one of those principles that we talk about in the fraternity. Heavily.
Of course it is.
And so,
but us having this conversation right now,
mm-hmm.
if we recognize the simple fact that the society tilts towards tyranny over and over again, and just the simple fact of saying enough, stop being oppressive, by many brothers' own definition, they would constitute that as trying to overthrow the government.
Understood.
There are people who would interpret it that way.
Sure.
So by us having this conversation, there could be individuals within our own fraternity that say those two guys, we need to kick them out.
Well, then I'll stand trial for that. If that's what
I would totally stand trial for that. I would absolutely 100% stand trial for that, stand a Masonic trial. And if Freemasonry said, we don't want you anymore because you're too much of a radical, then I would say, well, then that's fine.
Well, and this wouldn't be the first time in American history where we've had Masons on opposite sides within this country. I mean, you look at the Civil War. Sure. There were Masons fighting against Masons in the North and the South. Yeah. A lot of interesting stories if you ever care to dig up some of those about how those happened, because there's a lot of conflicting information there. I understand the concern. I was really disappointed to hear some of the things that were said about people who were at the Capitol building, not busting into the Capitol building, just walking down the street going, hey, what's that going on over there? Yeah. It's disturbing. And to think that there's such vitriol and cancel culture that's out there right now, that even our own fraternity who sees each other as brothers, and we talked about this when we talked about Freemasonry, are so quick to judge without letting anybody the benefit of the doubt or treating them like family as we're supposed to.
I mean, the on January 6th, there were, I have since heard from that day, I have since heard other Masons say, any Mason who was there, they should be kicked out.
Yeah.
And my response is, wait a minute, were they trying to overthrow the government, or were they trying to reinforce the government that was already in place? Because those are two different things.
Sure.
Even if the people, if we want to say for the sake of argument, that the individuals who breached the Capitol building, that walked in and still stayed within the little boundary line areas,
the velvet ropes,
velvet ropes, right? They were storming the Capitol so much that they maintained an orderly progression or procession through the Capitol building. Okay. So, but even for the sake of argument, even if we say that those people were so fed up with their government, were they really trying to overthrow it? Or were they really trying to say, you know what, I would rather we go back to a government that represented all Americans? Because were they trying to overthrow our Constitution? Or were they trying to say, you know what, I want to actually have a government that supports the Constitution? Because those are two different things.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people fail to recognize that difference. I think there are a lot of Masons who forget to recognize that difference. And I think a lot of Masons immediately latch on to, because we've talked about this before, most people don't think.
Well, and okay. All right. So let me back up just for 1 second. You know, I know, especially,
and I'm not calling for insurrection or revolt.
No. That's not what either one of us are doing. Yeah. But again, we're talking. So you brought up the Masons. I'll pick on ourselves and our group just for another quick second. Again, what I'm hearing you saying is there are people who are saying this. Yes, I'm sure there are. But you know what? I don't believe for a minute that that's the majority of that group either. That's just a smaller subsection of the larger populace, and it's just what I'm talking about. You're talking about a very small minority portion of the larger population. And I don't believe for one friggin' minute that group is any different than the entire American public either. I think you're talking about a very small percentage. And as history has shown us, usually it's the larger, or the least informed are usually the loudest in the crowd, and they make the biggest scene. And that's who I think you're talking about there as well. So anyway, continue.
Well, no, I mean, just, I wanted to bring that up because I think it's an important distinction. And I think it's important for people to recognize that when we say, even if when we say, you know what, stop with the crazy, stop it, leave Pepe Le Pew alone, leave Dr. Seuss alone, leave the Muppets alone, leave all of these different touch points that are part of our culture, part of our society, and have been for a long time. For decades, they haven't been perceived as racist or derogatory to any group of people. In fact, all of these things have celebrated humanity and entertained and brought joy and happiness to millions of people. And so when we stand up and say, you know what? No, I'm not going to let you say that Pepe Le Pew is problematic. I'm not going to let you say that Speedy Gonzalez is problematic because he's Mexican. I'm not going to let you do that anymore. By virtue of me saying that, I'm standing up against the oppression of these social justice warriors, people on the left who are trying to enforce their tyrannical view on other people. And guess who's in control of our federal government right now? A lot of leftists right now, right? So we have leftists in the White House, we have leftists that controlling the House, and we have leftists that actually break the tie in the Senate. So we have a very left-leaning government. And so by me saying no to leftism right now, there are some people that could construe that to be, well, he's anti-American. He wants to overthrow the government. I don't want to overthrow the government. I just simply want a constitutional government that doesn't oppress me. Is that so hard to ask for?
No.
Apparently it is.
No, it's not. And I can appreciate the point you're making when it comes to just I'm not telling anybody to revolt and to try and storm the Capitol building or storm anywhere else but you can say, no, I'm not going to do that. I know a lot of businesses out there right now who are doing, every time there's ongoing education in your place of business or anywhere else, you've got your sexual harassment training. I know somebody very near and dear to me actually did one for their work on unconscious bias, which is basically unconscious racism. And I said, well, if it were me, I'd say, no, I'm not taking that. I'm not going to do that. Well, what if that cost you your job? I would have to look at that, because that's indoctrination of an ideology. And I refuse to accept that. I'm not going to go out there and start calling everybody names and saying, well, you're all racist if you agree with it. And, call up the news channels and tell them to come out here because I'm making a scene. But I can say, no, I'm not going to participate in that. I'm not going to be a part of it. I'm not going to get indoctrinated with that, just like everything. No, I'm not doing it. Well, did I catch you in thought or with chocolate in your mouth?
With chocolate. Yeah, it would, it really depends on context, I think. If I'm working for a company and the company says you have to go through sensitivity training, or you're going to be fired, well, it has to depend on context. I have to look at my life and see what's happening at that moment. Is it a lot for me to go through that? I mean, I did it in college courses I took. There were plenty of college classes that I took that were being taught a very Marxist view of a subject. And I knew going in that was going to happen. And I knew I was going to be graded on how well I could spew, or at least tiptoe around the Marxist ideology that was being taught. I knew that. Now, I had a choice. I could either A, drop the class, or B, I could view it as part of a game and do what I needed to do to just appease the mob, appease the crowd, and get through it. I made my choice at the time for those classes. I think a lot of companies that bring in these racial training courses, right? These woke training classes, I think their intentions are really in the right place. I don't think they're doing it as a way to, they certainly don't know that it's going to contribute the opposite of what they're hoping to accomplish. They don't realize that. And I think they honestly believe that they're doing something that they think is going to be better, or that people are going to appreciate when everything is said and done. I don't think it's being done in any malice.
See, no, and I don't think it's being done in any malice. I don't think that their hearts are in the right places, though, either. I think that is purely some lawyer told them this is what you need to do to cover your ass. And I don't think that they give two rats one way or the other. I don't believe either one of those things are true.
No, the reason why I don't believe that they're necessarily covering their ass is because we don't have a huge slate of legal issues and court cases based on racial inequality right now. We did with the gender thing. We did with sexual harassment, and so that's why they implemented sexual harassment, because there were a lot of legal cases at the time.
Yeah, but
I honestly believe, based on the conversations that I've had with different organizations, that most of the HR groups are just doing it because they truly believe that, this is going to be a good thing. They think that the culture is shifting. The truth is, the culture hasn't shifted.
I don't believe that. I know I understand where you're at, but I don't believe that. I don't believe that for a minute.
Yeah. And the reason, and here's why I say this. Here's why I say this. And the reason why I say this is because it takes less than 2% of a population to change the larger population.
I know that. But what I'm saying is, so I don't think that they're going, okay, the culture's changed. This is what the culture wants. Mm-hmm. No, I believe that they say the culture is changing. We're going to do this now to save the company's liable butts when something happens here soon, because I believe that that's exactly where they're at. You're right. We don't have a whole lot of court cases out there right now like we did with the sexual harassment and the gender dysphoria BS that's going on out there. We don't have that yet, but we've got the precedence of that stuff already happened up the last few years, that they go, this is just the next dang thing. So we're going to cover our respective company ass right now, put this in place. We did training. We already did training. We were ahead of the game. We did training, and so it's not our fault. That's purely on the individual. Company cannot be held liable. Thank you very much.
No, and the reason why I don't believe that they're doing it for legal reasons is because of the simple fact that it is very widely known. There is tremendous evidence that shows the racial training classes actually create racists in the organization. So right now, every lawyer worth his salt, and if you're not saying this as a lawyer, then you're not worth your salt and you should be fired. But every lawyer in an organization, the advice should not be do the training to avoid getting sued. It should absolutely 100% be don't do the training because you're likely going to create racists, and then your likelihood of being sued for racial issues is going to go up just because you're introducing the training. And so there is zero evidence that racial training actually curbs racism. Zero. In fact, the evidence is the opposite. So Which tells me they're not doing it to avoid being sued, because if they were trying to do it to avoid being sued, they wouldn't do it.
No, you're looking at this based on facts and outcomes, which I love. Yeah. I love you for.
That's what the law firms have to do. That's what they have to do.
No, that's not what they have to do. They have to absolutely play on the possibility of repercussions. That is not anything. You look at this COVID thing, and I hate to bring COVID back up, but if you were actually looking at data and looking at what the data it says, what this does, and what our outcomes should be, COVID would have been done, because it has nothing to do, and we wouldn't be doing masks and we wouldn't be doing all this other crap, because right now we've got all the data in the world, excuse me, to show that that's not effective.
But that you're trying to take a societal thing versus what's happening at the organizational side, right? So when you have organizations doing racial training, that's different than what's happening at the larger societal cultural level. So the organizations that are bringing in racial training, they are legitimately trying to do they're the idea that's happening within the HR firms is this will actually be good for our employees. But the fact is now we actually are seeing organizations swap that. Coca-Cola got busted doing it and they've stopped it. LinkedIn used to have all of these woke training classes. They've now since pulled them because now they've realized that it's problematic and most people are now against it. So we've just, and this was just happened within the last couple of weeks. So we are seeing companies go, oh, wait, this is problematic now. We'll stop. So that is happening, because if it was truly, as you said, that it's legal, that they're just trying to CYA, they A, wouldn't do it, or B, they would continue to do it even when now large groups of people are saying this is an issue. And they're legitimately now backing down because now they realize, oh, you don't need this, you don't want this, okay, we'll back off. So I think the start of this is HR companies, HR groups had their hearts in the right place. They thought it would actually be inclusive and diversifying because a small group of people in the culture said, we need to have diversity training. We need to diversify. And that still continues. We're to a certain degree, not so much with the racial training, but we still have people celebrating down to the middle management and people on teams saying, well, we got to be all diversified. We have to have diversity. It's good to have diversity. And what they're just talking about racial diversity because everybody wants to be inclusive. They want to say, of course I like Black people. Of course I like the Latino people. Of course I like the yellow Asian people. I'm not a bigot. They're doing everything they can to show that they're not a bigot. And now it's insanity.
It is insanity. It is insanity. And you know what? I hope you're right, because that means that there's possibly a way back. But you've got a much more glamorous view of HR than I do.
Well, I mean, I've worked with quite a number of them.
I believe you.
And including legal teams. I mean, but I also don't have a cynical view of how a lot of organizations function. Now, to say that every single company is trying to avoid is not doing it for legal reasons would be a misnomer. I think there are plenty of shitty organizations with absolutely terrible leadership. And so, of course, they're going to be making all kinds of decisions based on stupid reasons. Not those organizations do exist, but I think a lot of your larger companies like American Express, for example, or Motorola, or Coca-Cola, I think these large, you have to understand another piece too of this. Another part of this equation is many organizations have realized, because there's tremendous effort that says, or tremendous evidence to support this, that says companies that do community outreach, they tend to survive longer as organizations, and they tend to weather economic depressions and economic downturns more better than companies that do not have community rapport and community relationships outside of just selling their products and services. So I think this gets tied in with a lot of these big organizations who love to do community outreach. Companies like American Express, for example, and Visa and Coca-Cola, et cetera. And it plays right into that mentality of, well, let's do it for the community and all of the nice jazzy stuff. They're walking into a minefield is what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And when they have these racial trainings and it makes people more racist, then the lawsuits are going to come like rapid fire. Yep. And all of the people standing up there saying, now you're calling me a racist, they're going to point to the actual racial trainings, and those things are going to be torpedoed.
Yep. Well, and this, I've said it before. You played a little video, one of our previous episode about one of these racial trainings. Um, and it's just disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting. Either, and all of these have said the same thing that I've seen. Either you're a racist and you admit it, or you deny it, which makes you more racist. It's worse. It's kind of the old the witch trials,
Yeah.
we tie a rock around her legs and throw her in the bottom of the ocean
Right.
or in the lake. If she floats, she's a witch. Well, okay. Well, if she doesn't, well, then I guess she wasn't, but she's dead now anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Well, fantastic. What are your options? So I don't see how that's productive to society at all.
Well,
And nobody does. Nobody does.
No. And if anybody went to some racial training, is it good to have to raise awareness about things like how other cultures interact? Yes, but that's different than racial.
That's not what
training.
These racial training is. Yeah.
But a lot of these race peddlers, they mask it in terms of learn about the other organizations. Okay. That's how they mask it. But if anybody were to go, if any white person in the sound of my voice were to go to a company training and somebody stands in front of you and tells you how terrible you are as a person because of the color of your skin, you have absolutely 100% the right to get up and walk out. Right. Because nobody should have to suffer through that. Nobody should. And if you raise a stink then and say, well, I was offended. You damn right you were offended. That's true offensiveness right there. Yeah. And so you should stand up and say no to your company. I'm not going to put myself through that because the facilitator literally told me that I'm a piece of crap. Right.
And the argument that these people are out trying to fight racism, bullshit. They're promoting it.
Oh, absolutely. They can't. They have. I mean, it has to continue.
How can you actually look at me as a white person and say, you're white, therefore you are racist, you're a terrible person, you're a demon, it's in your nature, it's in your blood, and you can never overcome it? That's racism.
Right.
And then tell me that you are anti-racist? No. Right. You love it.
Right. Well,
that's disgusting.
They need to feed off of it, right? Because they love the idea that these racial trainings create racists because they're just creating their own, in their minds, they're creating the need for additional racial training.
Right. That's right.
So they need racism to continue. It's like the guy who founded I want to say it was Greenpeace. I think it was Greenpeace. One of the main founders of Greenpeace, they got to this point where they realized, hey, you know what? We actually did what we set out to do. But technically the organization should have just kind of dissolved and gone away.
Right.
And you can't do that because now you've got an organization making millions of dollars every year in donations, donating to the movement. So you have to move on to the next thing. Mm-hmm. Nobody wants to cut the gravy train.
Right.
Why would anybody want to act against their own self-interest and say, this cushy job where I'm making $100,000 a year and I get to talk about whales, I'm going to just dissolve it and just disappear into the ether? No, they got to move on to the next thing. They got to come up with the next reason why whales are dying or whatever, so they can continue to make their gravy train.
Exactly. And that's why I was talking about this. This is not going to go away. There is absolutely no appeasement that is going to satiate any of these groups. You have to be able to say, no, this is the end of the line. You have reached the end. No, that you turn around and go back. That's it. We're not going to appease. We're not going to, as you said, take a knee or backstep or backpedal any further. We've got to be able to stand up and say, no, I'm sorry. I'm not racist. I wasn't born that way, and I'm not going to be. And I'm not going to sit here and listen to you tell me I am.
Right.
Thank you. I'm getting up and I'm leaving. I'm not gonna continually have all of my culture dissolved out from underneath me. I'm going to hold on to what I've got. Thank you very much. And
Yeah.
there was a response to that even with the Dr. Seuss books. You know, the demand for those shot up. I mean, if I ran a zoo, I mean, you could usually get that book for like 10, 12 bucks or whatever it was
Yeah.
at Barnes and Noble or wherever. Shoot, I think eBay, there was a private seller who was auctioning it off and it got up to like $300-$400.
Oh, sure.
I mean, because everybody wanted a copy of those before they thought they couldn't even get them anymore.
Well, and then it's going to be digitized, and people are going to they're going to create PDFs of it. They're going to BitTorrent it out. People will share copies of it just so that they have it. Now they've raised all of this interest in it. And of course, that's going to play right into their hands of, well, that's even more reason. Now we have to clamp down, because if people are going to share these kinds of this kind of problematic content, right? We need to pare down. Has anybody read the damn book 1984? I mean, this, George Orwell talked about this kind of stuff. When we eliminate words, right? We use words to think. We use language to think and to communicate on what we're thinking. And when you start limiting words and you limit artifacts within the cultural space, then you limit the ability for people to think. And this goes back to the old adage of those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. And so you have to keep those cultural texts in play. You have to say, you know what, this was part of our society. We shouldn't ban it. We shouldn't make the publisher feel terrible for continuing to publish something. No different than we should not make the publisher of Huckleberry Finn and the Adventures of Tom Sawyer. We shouldn't make them feel like they can't publish that book,
No.
because those are important cultural contexts of our country and our history.
If you are offended by content of a piece of material, whatever it is, don't buy it. Don't let your kids buy it. You know, I'm offended by a lot of hip hop and rap music. I don't buy it. I don't let my kids listen to it because the language and the lyrics are offensive and foul for the most part. I don't let my 5-year-old listen to it. You know what? She's an adult. She can make her own choice. Same with my son. That's how you actually make that cognizant choice for yourself. But I'm not going to go out and try and ban an entire genre of music or expression for for an entire culture of people. I wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
You know, I believe in people's rights. I believe in the right of free speech. I believe in the right of free expression. I believe that I love the fact that we have rights, and I hate the fact that some people use those rights in ways that I may not agree with, but I'll still stand up and say they have the right to do that. I'm not going to limit their rights just because I disagree with how they're exercising them.
Yeah. Well, good stuff. You have any last minute parting thoughts before we put this one to bed?
No, I believe that there's a time for us to be able to stand up and say enough is enough. Maybe you're right. Maybe that has passed, but I believe that there's enough opportunity for the mass of the American public. And I will reiterate that again. There are far, 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 far more people out there who disagree with the way these things are happening enough to be able to make a difference, even by little small tokens like what you said. Nope, I'm not going to stand here and let you call me a racist. I'm not going to tolerate that. I'm not going to stand here and I'm not going to listen to this crap that you're spouting off. I'm not going to be a part of it. There's enough of us out there to make a difference if we just do those small things to say, I'm going to stand up for this. Sorry, it's important.
And I do think that in the domain of the domain of culture, I think Americans can fight there and can hopefully, with enough voices screaming against the small minority of people that are out there, I think America can reclaim its culture. I think we can. The area where I think it's much more problematic is turning the tide of government oppression. I don't think that, I don't see any way off that road. I think the only way is to continue the only way is to continue down that road, and that's because the first role of the first job of a politician once elected is to get reelected. And the way you get reelected is you make laws. I mean, we send people to Congress, and now we celebrate sending people to Washington just so that they can create laws on us.
Yep.
We there are a huge number of Americans who are absolutely okay with that concept. They are absolutely okay, and they celebrate the fact that we get to send people to a different city to make our lives worse. And so I don't think that there's any coming back from that, from that path. I don't think there's any getting off that road. I think that road is going to continue to lead to government oppression and tyrannical rule over the population. Now, does that mean that full tyranny is going to take place in our lifetime? I hope not. But who knows? It happened in Venezuela, but it happened within one generation in Venezuela. Hopefully it doesn't happen here. But I think most Americans would have to experience a total tyrannical rule before they actually understood what they had before and what they lost.
Yeah.
And, I know I'm not going to go out and I'm not going to purchase a bunch of assault weapons and things like that and try to fight tanks, or I'm going to be one of the first people they're going to throw into a prison. I mean, so I already know that. Yeah. Right. So I'm not going to I'm not that kind of a person to try to overthrow my government. No. I'm the kind of person that would wind up getting swept up in the mass incarceration that would end up happening. I know that. And that's a sad reality. And it makes me sad that that's where I see all of this playing, but I don't see any politician pulling back from that or causing us to shrink the level of our government. And that might seem a sad reality for people, but I'm of this belief. You can't fix it unless you actually talk about what the problem is. You can't fix it unless you actually acknowledge what's possible or the problems that exist. And until we do, we can't get off the road, right? By me talking about it and bringing up that reality, maybe people get shocked and they're actually awakened by it and go, oh gosh, this is something we have to do something about. But not talking about it, I'm tired of people saying there's no way tyranny can ever happen in the United States of America. Never say never.
No. And we have evidence of that happening. And you know what? I did have a glimmer of hope this last week. I saw a few governors rolling back all the restrictions, and a few states have now said enough is enough, and we're opening up and lifting restrictions off, which is much needed, very much so. Now, I'm not going to compare that necessarily to the overarching control of a government entity, but and nor am I calling by any means, just to be clear one last time, neither one of us are saying we're supportive of a revolution or of an overthrow of the government. But we've got to get back some sense of semblance of normal. And I mean that in a lot of different ways, not just with the change in our normal daily life since our COVID BS happened, but also in the sense of the deterioration of the culture that makes us up as Americans. I believe we need to grasp onto some of that too.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, good talk. I think that just about wraps it up for us. As always, you can find all of our stuff out on our website at fusionunderground.net. We will be back next week to wrap up season 4. And then maybe by then we'll be able to talk about some of the stuff that we're working on, and go from there.
I think we better talk a little bit about it so everybody knows what to expect in season 5, but
yeah, definitely. Yeah, we're not going away.
No.
We're not going away.
Unless the cops come and sweep us both up and throw us in prison, which I don't know.
Yes,
maybe they're
definitely
out front already. I'll have to look.
Yeah, who knows? Right.
There they are. Well,
All right, everybody.
Quick.
Yeah. All right, everybody. It's been a pleasure. For Jason Moret, I'm Manuel Ramirez. You've been listening to the Fusion Underground.
Have a good night.
Peace word light.